Newton's phallic women. Let us now turn to examine how Newton's images may be used to open up for masochistic movements of desire that are beyond this unequal and congealed matrix, to understand masochism as a matter of sexual, or indeed masochistic, indifference. Newton's photography, and particularly his photography for Wolford, combines masochist and fetishist aesthetics, abounding in images of seemingly straight Amazon and phallic women dressed in or otherwise utilizing fetish paraphernalia, from Wolford pantyhose, stockings, and lingerie, to high heels, gloves, and wigs, swords, whips, guns, sunglasses, and cameras. While we regret that we are not able to reproduce any of these images here, let us try to provide a description of their key features. Newton's phallic Amazon women are alone in these photos. Most of them depict one or two phallic women. There are never any men or other women present. The models rarely look into the camera. Instead, they are facing their back against the camera. Look straight beyond the camera, or look at the camera through mirror sunglasses. In one photo, the model is wearing a white pair of the shiny Wolford Fatal pantyhose. Turning her back to Newton's lens, she holds a photograph in her hand while carrying a camera on her shoulder. While she is made to pose for Newton's lens, she has made someone else pose to her lens. In another photo, two models wearing Wolford bodies are facing each other, standing up. One of them has her back to the camera. Like the previous photo, they are made to pose as if they have no concern for Newton's lens. Instead, they are caught up with one another, seeking to dominate the other with their medieval design sword. In a third photo, one seems to have taken charge. Facing her back to the camera, she has forced the other into a seated position, holding her down with the force of her own hand. While Newton's work as a whole has been criticized for being both sexist and misogynist, and for romanticizing fascist or even Nazi aesthetics, we find these parts of his work particularly useful for developing a notion of masochistic indifference. While we agree with much of the critique raised against his work, we believe there is more to be gained from reading his work as a critique of the very same things he is critiqued for. Below, we are therefore attempting a counter-reading of his work to upset sexual difference and male supremacy. Indeed, reading his sexualized and pornographic work in a way which visualizes established notions about gender, sexuality, and race may empower feminist and queer discourses to question old truths dictated by male thinkers such as Freud and Deleuze. But before doing so, let us return back to Freud's understanding of phallic woman. Castrated women, phallic women. Although Deleuze omits the idea of the mistress as a phallic woman, Freud in fact gave certain attention. According to him, it is before a phallic and fetishized woman that the masochist hero submits and faints. Yet, it is woman's castrated nature that is at the core of Freud's understanding of phallic woman, hence divesting her of any true power. As men are terrified by her lack, woman is reconstituted as a fetishized phallic woman who conceals her lack and castration. But the fetish triggers sexual arousal in the masochist, connecting terror and excitement. The sight of Medusa's head makes the spectator stiff with terror, turns him to stone. Observe that we have once again the same origin from the castration complex and the same transformation of effect, for becoming stiff means an erection. Thus, in the original situation, it offers consolidation to the spectator. He is still in position of a penis, and the stiffening reassures him of the fact. To be stiffed with terror is to be stiffed with desire, in this case, with masochistic desire. Sexual arousal requires terror. Freud, then, views the phallic woman as a male creation, invented to help him repress his fears of castration. Like in the Deleuzian reading, woman is only a tool, an object, in the male's masochistic scenario. The threat her lack constitutes is then avoided via the fetishes she is made to wear, furs, whips, high heels, because these fetishes divest her of lack and invest her with a phallus. According to Barbara Creed, the phallic woman not only conceals her lack and castration, her fetishes also invest her with the power to castrate by means of a vagina dentata. While the masochist thrives on this fear of castration, the phallic woman is not merely a male creation, but a female creation through which women refuse to be reduced to a patriarchal image. Having acquired the phallus, the phallic woman transgresses and denaturalizes sexual and gendered identity. Exposing phallic masculinity as a put-on, as mere style, she delegitimizes it as phallic imposture. Masochism may therefore contribute to a queer reversal of sexual and gendered power relations. While this reversal may be pursued through lesbian, gay, and transgender forms of masochism, it is, as we shall argue below, already imbued in what first appears as straight masochism. And we find that in Newton's seemingly straight images of Amazon and phallic women dressed in fetish paraphernalia, the masochist contract reveals itself as one in which both parties share power and powerlessness, as well as sharing gendered positions so as to blur them. In his images, we find a portrayal of desires and queer positions that go beyond the regular masochistic contract by reversing its positions via the involvement of a becoming both. In fact, we would go so far as to argue that any masochism involves sexual indifference. Interestingly, some of the theoretical tools which make such a reversal possible are already implicit in Deleuze, not in his interpretation of masochism, but in his later works with Guattari. It is particularly their notions of the body without organs and becoming woman which enable us to counter-read Newton's photography in a way which buggers both Freud and Deleuze. Buggering Freud and Deleuze. Deleuze's ontology of desire is central to our attempt to bugger both Freudian and Deleuzian masochism and to open up masochism beyond the heterosexual matrix of male masochists and female mistresses. Although this ontology is not explicit, and perhaps even undermined in Deleuze's reading of masochism, his understanding of desire as excess rather than as lack was at the core of his persistent attacks on Freud. Deleuze's ontology of excess underpins Deleuze and Guattari's notion of the body without organs developed in 1,000 plateaus. Unlike Freud's notion of desire, the body without organs is not driven by a desire to possess a certain object that it currently lacks. Rather, it is the experimental, accidental, serendipitous, and unpredictable outcome of forces of desire, productive in their own right. The body without organs is a matter of endless becoming. It is not given, but an experimental practice into which desire continuously invests itself. It cannot be taken for granted, but needs to be created. The body without organs may experimentally seek out directions for its activities, but it may never accomplish or finalize a preset goal. By undermining the organic functioning of the body with organs and challenging the psychoanalyst's search for unitary selfhood, Deleuze and Guattari maintain that there is no end to the process of creating a body without organs. However, making oneself a body without organs should not be taken too literally. Even though Deleuze and Guattari take inspiration from Antonin Artaud, who may be seen to have made himself a body without organs when committing suicide on November 28, 1947, the body without organs has nothing to do with suicide death or the Freudian death instinct. The body without organs is full of life. Creating a body without organs is therefore a task to be attacked with caution. Overdose is a danger. You don't do it with a sledgehammer. You use a very fine file. According to Keith Ansel Pearson, creating a body without organs is therefore a matter of cautious, patient experimentation and of opening up the body to connections and relations that presuppose an entire assemblage. As suggested above, there is always a risk with opening up too much. Nevertheless, what Deleuze and Guattari encourage when posing the challenge of creating a body without organs is to openly experiment with new and different bodily habits and ways of life. That is, they encourage experimentation with what a body can do. In conclusion, it may enable one to use one's body and express corporeality in unpredictable ways that disturb and upset the boundaries dictated by the organism, the guardians of biomedical, social, gendered, and sexual discipline. Creating a body without organs involves becoming other. Becoming woman is the prime trajectory through which they explore becoming other. Deleuze and Guattari emphasize becoming woman for three main reasons. It explicitly challenges the dominance of the rationalized male subject in philosophy, science, and society. It involves destructing one's molar identity by connecting to, without imitating, stereotypes of womanhood. And it involves expanding and changing both the assemblages by which one is constituted and the assemblages of which one is a part. Unfortunately, Deleuze and Guattari pursue this without problematizing their own manhood or the male perspective presumed, and this is why they have become the target of much feminist critique. According to Elizabeth Gross, the metaphor of becoming woman is a male appropriation of women's politics, struggles, theories, knowledges. As she points out, however, the problem with these critiques is that they can be raised against virtually any male philosopher, and against many female philosophers too. Moreover, Deleuze and Guattari's male-centrism can be resolved, for example, by relating the body without organs to a notion of becoming man, whereas becoming woman is a pseudo-woman implying a male starting point, a man becoming woman. Becoming man may decenter the male and undermine the fixed essentiality of masculinity by departing from a female position, a woman becoming man. Masochistic indifference. Although the experimental practices of the body without organs, becoming woman, and becoming man, may seem very different from the masochistic contract, they are not chaotic like sadism, and the masochistic contract may involve some of the bodily processes actualized through the body without organs, becoming woman, and becoming man. In masochism, the theatrical structure with clearly assigned roles is central, but these roles make possible both a rupture of the female-male dichotomy and, we argue, gender bending. The masochist goes further in his longing, however. Instead of reinscribing sexual difference by taking the position of the female, he transgresses this difference by becoming not woman and not man, but both. In his longing for pleasure, pain, and intimacy with the mother, his desire is to overcome difference and to become one with her, hence upheaving sexual difference to become both. Instead of reinforcing sexual difference, he is striving for sexual indifference. The concept of a sexual indifference leaves the father powerless, deprived of the phallus, since the law of sexual difference is closely connected and make possible the law of the father and vice versa. What the concept does, then, is to question not only sexual difference and the father's dominant position, but also the symbolic and the imaginary as two gender dichotomous spheres. Sexual difference, according to psychoanalytic theory, constitutes the basis of, and is inscribed in, the symbolic. The symbolic is that powerful imaginary realm that upholds what Judith Butler has called the heterosexual matrix, repetitiously and obnoxiously reinscribing itself as solid truth. But according to Butler, these sexually differentiated positions, with man as the upholder of the law and woman as positioned outside of it, are anything but fixed but might be altered, subverted, and made invalid by the unconscious processes of transgenderism, transvestism, and gender role-playing. While we agree with Butler that these practices hold an important political potential for subversion of sexually differentiated and gendered positions, other contexts may offer further opportunities for subversion, for instance beyond the constraints of the heterosexual nuclear family. What happens to the symbolic when, for example, the father is missing, when there is no man to uphold the law, no father to initiate the son into the symbolic? Will the son of a single mother for always be restricted to the imaginary? If normal heterosexuality is the prime scene for sexual difference, as Butler argues, then any deviation from it may offer a possible upheaval of this very difference. Lesbianism and gayness are perhaps the two main practices in which sexual indifference is most central and desirable, but even certain straight formations may offer a conscious upheaval of sexual difference, whether temporary or constant, real or fictional. We want to point out that this desirable indifference should not be understood as a collapsing of the different into the same, in the service of a power that can simply be defined in terms of identity, or that remains inextricably committed to the patriarchal. Rather, it is a specific suspension of differences, somewhere between unity and a longed-for radical diversity and multiplicity. Notwithstanding the earlier discussion of masochism as fake, in its formal power swapping between man and woman, we do believe that male masochism contains a potential for sexual indifference. In this sense, masochism holds contradictory opportunities for the partners involved. It can be read as a conscious denial of sexual difference, as well as a blurring of homosexuality and homosexuality within the frames of a stylized scene in which gender and sex may be played out as floating, as well as rigid. This is not to say that masochistic indifference is in itself a strategy of sameness, nor that it is a reinvention of it. What this indifference does, however, is to provide an insight into an alternative model of masculine power, one where power is perpetuated by self-mutilation and by simultaneously destroying and reinventing sameness. Hence, the masochistic dreams of an indifference between the sexes and genders, one within which the phallus is decentralized, and one within which boundaries of gender can be transgressed. This dream is part of a fantasy centered around an impossible and irrational subjectivity that includes within itself both all its objects and its others. This will to sexual indifference vacillates between masculine and feminine positions, a dreaming of having and being both. The masochistic total subject dreams of being simultaneously both masculine and feminine, as well as of being both the subject of sexual desire and that same desire's object. In Roland Barthes' words, of a conformity of essence between other and myself, I want to be the other, I want the other to be me, as if we were united, enclosed in the same sack of skin. In the Newtonian models, being in that same sack of skin, dressed in tight-fitting pantyhose, connoting a second skin within which I and the other can both fit, visualize the longing for becoming both, and the desire to being both. To this kind of total subjectivity, nothing is alien, nothing is impossible. Instead of managing binary oppositions by dispersing them in a field of multiplying differences, the masochist imagines a subjectivity in which all contradictions can subsist. Hence, the total subject is able to simultaneously operate and refute power. As a construction of power that contradicts and denies itself, then, masochism crosses the conventional political divides. Although masochism's transgression of conventional heterosexual practices and identities may reinforce as well as subvert those same practices and identities, it gains its subversive potential from being more than a practice ascribed only to others. When seeing masochism on a spectrum, we will at one end find a practice including all of us, because much of our position vis-a-vis the other follows the same pattern as the masochist pattern. As Roy Schaefer stresses, every disorder, no matter how small and insignificant, and hence normal, has its share of unhappiness and unfulfillment, and every one is characterized by repetitiveness, unconsciously designed and executed self-injuriousness. Conclusion. And so, Newton's photos of Amazons and fetish paraphernalia can be studied and understood to open up masochistic movements of desire beyond the heterosexual matrix of male masochists and female mistresses. His models decentralize the phallus and transgress boundaries of gender and stereotypes of womanhood. By doing so, they open up for bisexual and transgender desire amongst the Amazon models as well as in the female and male spectator. Further, they visualize a desire for sexual indifference, or what can be called a becoming both. By doing so, they also help us see masochism as an expression and a practice that upsets heteronormativity as well as homonormativity. Through his images of these Amazon and phallic women, the masochist contract reveals itself as one in which both parties share power and powerlessness. It opens up for giving the phallus away, throwing it away, or sharing it. And so, the male masochist, as the phallic women in Newton's photos, remind us that the phallus is a construction, a disposable and distributable idea, an idea which can be shared between the sexes. Seeking it there, seeking it here, not finding it anywhere, or, since both of us have the phallus, let's play a new game.